Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're anything like the writers we work with, you know that feeling, that moment of just profound relief.
Oh, absolutely.
You've been staring at a blank screen for weeks. You finally hit the word count. You've wrestled all your data into submission, and you hit save on what feels like the final complete draft of your huge research paper.
And you think, that's it, I'm done.
The mission, you tell yourself, is complete.
And that right there is where the trouble begins.
Ah.
We are here today to, fundamentally challenge that idea. The idea that submitting the first draft is the end of the writing process. In fact, that first draft, it's truly only the beginning of strong, impactful academic writing.
So it's not the finish line, it's what? The starting gun.
Exactly. I like to think of it like this.
Yeah.
If the first draft is the foundation of a building, just the concrete slab,
Yeah.
then revision and editing are the structural work, the interior design, the wiring, and the final polish that actually makes that building functional and impressive.
Okay, let's unpack this because I think our listener is looking for a massive competitive edge here. Our mission today is a comprehensive deep dive, a shortcut really, to mastering that refinement stage.
Mhm.
This is where rough ideas become, well, surgically precise arguments, where ambiguity gets replaced by clarity, and where the overall coherence of your work just skyrockets. We're moving way beyond just finding typos.
We are. We are turning drafts into diamonds.
I like that. Drafts into diamonds.
And we are focusing specifically on coherence, which is almost always the biggest stumbling block for otherwise really talented researchers. They can gather the facts, they can do the work.
But they can't quite weave it all together.
Exactly. They struggle to make those facts connect seamlessly. We can think of the example of Ziad, a brilliant student whose draft we looked at.
Oh, this is a great case study.
It is. He had done meticulous research. I mean, he was confident. But when he finally stepped back and looked at it, he realized his paper was it was a slog to read.
Even for him, the author.
Even for him. It had unnecessary repetition, a lot of unclear sentences, and ideas that, in his own words, just lacked flow.
So his problem wasn't intellectual, it was, what, architectural?
That's a perfect way to put it. He hadn't failed at gathering the information. He had failed at making that information work together. It was a coherence problem.
So he had all the correct puzzle pieces, but they weren't locked into place. The big picture wasn't clear to the reader.
Precisely. Coherence is the intellectual glue. It's what separates a disparate collection of facts from a compelling, unified argument. If your reader has to stop, backtrack, reread sentences, or wonders, even for a moment, why paragraph B follows paragraph A,
You've lost them.
you have failed the coherence test. The friction is just too high.
So we're providing the exact methodology to eliminate that friction. Here's the plan for what we'll cover. We are going to establish the crucial two-step workflow you have to follow revision before editing.
Which is key.
Then, we will arm you with a specific, actionable coherence toolkit, show you how to rigorously strengthen the substance of your argument, and finally, deliver the practical techniques, the immediate fixes, to catch those sneaky final errors.
Sounds good.
Let's start with that fundamental step, understanding the difference between the two jobs you'll be doing.
Okay, so the first, most critical distinction you need to internalize right now is the difference between revising and editing.
And this is where people get tripped up.
Constantly. We see writers make this mistake all the time. They finish the draft and they jump straight into checking spelling and comma placement. They're trying to edit a document that hasn't been structurally validated yet.
Okay, so let's use that architectural analogy you brought up. Let's really define these as two fundamentally separate processes. So, revising. This is the big picture stage, right?
Yes.
It focuses entirely on improving the ideas and the structure. Its goal is to improve the meaning of the paper. This is the heavy lifting, the part where you might have to delete entire pages.
That's the hard part, emotionally.
Hmm.
And editing, conversely, focuses solely on the mechanics of communication. It's about correcting grammar, smoothing out sentence structure, ensuring your word choice is precise, and checking for punctuation. Its goal is to ensure accuracy at the micro level.
I think framing this as two distinct roles is incredibly helpful. So when you revise, you are the architect of your paper. You're stepping back to make sure the blueprints actually make sense.
Right.
And when you edit, you're the quality control inspector. You're checking that every joint is tightened and every electrical outlet works. And you simply cannot inspect the quality of the wiring, the editing, until the structural plans are finalized and the walls are up the revising.
And the cost of reversing that order is immense. It's huge. If you start worrying about whether you correctly use the passive voice in a paragraph, when you should be asking, does this entire section on historical context even belong in a paper focused on current
Or
trends,
just spinning your wheels.
you are wasting time and mental energy. You might perfectly edit a paragraph you end up cutting entirely minutes later because you realize it completely undermines your thesis.
That's the classic sunk cost fallacy in action, isn't it? You feel invested in that paragraph because you spent time polishing it.
Exactly.
So let's get concrete. When we put on our revision mindset hat, what are the critical big picture questions that we absolutely have to address before anything else?
Okay, they're fundamentally structural and intellectual. The very first question has to be, is the overall argument clear?
Simple as that.
Is the thesis statement easily discernible in the introduction? And is it consistently supported? And more importantly, is it advanced throughout the entire paper?
Right. Because if I, as the reader, can't articulate your central argument after reading the introduction.
The paper is doomed. You're
Yeah.
lost from the start.
Okay, so after that, we move to the macro organization.
Yes. The paper structure logical.
Yes.
This is where you have to compare the reality of the draft against the outline you should have created in the beginning.
Or the one you wish you'd created.
Or the one you wish you'd created, right?
Yeah.
Did you outline 3 primary supporting pillars, but the draft only addresses 2 and then introduces some tangential 4th one? If you meandered off track during the fever of drafting,
Which happens.
it always happens.
Mm.
Now is the time to ruthlessly realign.
And alignment is key. You're checking, what does every single piece of the paper actually serve the main question?
Precisely. You need to verify. Does each each chapter, each major section, each individual body paragraph, does it answer the original research question you set out to address?
And if it doesn't?
If a section, no matter how insightful or brilliant you think it is tangential, it has to be rigorously refocused or removed. If you can't draw a direct line of relevance from that paragraph's topic sentence all the way back to your thesis, it just doesn't belong.
Ouch. That's a tough one. Revision is also where we eliminate redundancy, which you mentioned was a major issue for Ziad.
A huge issue.
So you're asking, have I repeated myself unnecessarily?
Yes. Like, did I state the basic definition in the introduction, summarize the same finding in the literature review, and then state the exact same finding again in the conclusion without adding any new analysis or synthesis?
That just feels like padding.
It is. Repetition, especially unanalyzed repetition, is the enemy of conciseness, and it makes your argument feel static, like it's going in circles.
We see that a lot, don't we? Writers repeating introductory material because they're worried the reader didn't get it.
All the time. They're nervous the reader didn't grasp the concept the first time. But the assumption you must make in academic writing is that your reader is intelligent and focused. If you stated it clearly once, you need to trust them and move on to the analysis.
And what's the last big structural check for revision?
The last one is about flow between the big chunks, or the transitions between major sections smooth.
So moving from, say, the lit review to your method section.
Exactly that. When the reader moves from the background literature review to the detailed methodology section, is there a guiding sentence or maybe a brief paragraph that bridges that gap? It needs to signal a deliberate shift in function. Without that bridge, the reader experiences a logical jolt. It feels clunky.
Okay, so once that macro structure is locked down, the architect is satisfied. Now you switch roles.
Now you switch roles, you put on the microscope, and you enter the editing mindset.
And what are those micro-level questions?
These are the mechanical questions. They're focused on precision, not meaning. So you're asking, are there specific grammar mistakes? Like problems with complex subject-verb agreement or issues with tense consistency?
And what about sentences? Are they just too long and confusing?
Yes, that's a huge one. Are sentences unnecessarily long, convoluted, or confusing? This is where we address complexity at the granular sentence-by-sentence level.
And academic work has its own language, so vocabulary must be a big part of this.
A huge part. Was specialized academic vocabulary used appropriately? Are you using precise terminology, say distinguishing between effect and effect? Or are you resorting to vague colloquialisms or slang that just diminishes your professional authority?
Right. Your vocabulary has to reflect the rigor of your research.
It has to.
And then there's the basic proofreading, which I feel like it's so often missed because writers are just blind to their own work after a while.
They absolutely are. So you have to check spelling and punctuation errors. These micro errors, they seem small, but they create an instant impression of carelessness.
They really do. They can immediately erode your authority and credibility. They basically tell the reader, I didn't take this seriously enough to review it one more time.
So the takeaway here, and this is confirmed across all successful academic writing guides, is the strict adherence to this workflow. You tackle revision, first improving meaning, and then, and only then, do you tackle editing, improving accuracy.
Because an accurate, well-edited paper that makes no logical sense
Is just as useless as a coherent paper full of glaring typos. You need both, but you absolutely must have them in the sequence.
So if we connect this back to Ziad's initial problem, he was wasting time polishing sentences.
Yes.
When he should have been moving, cutting, or clarifying entire structural blocks of his argument. Revision is the process that ensures the meaning and the flow can hold up under heavy scrutiny long before you worry about the cosmetic stuff.
Now we can get into the practical implementation of flow, which was Ziad's core hurdle, coherence. We checked the big picture structure, but how do we build that internal paragraph-by-paragraph flow that makes the reader just glide effortlessly through the paper?
Okay, so coherence, as we established, means your ideas flow naturally and logically. A truly coherent paper feels completely connected. I like to think of it not just as a train track, but as a conversation, each point logically leading to the next, building towards some inevitable conclusion.
That's a great way to think about it. So let's dive into what we're calling the Coherence Toolkit. There are 5 specific actions listeners can take on their drafts right now. First up is Action A, checking the logical order.
And this is where we drill down into the flow within a major section of the paper, not just between sections.
Right, and you have to be absolutely ruthless here. Ask yourself, does each paragraph flow naturally from the one before it? Or is there some kind of mental jump the reader has to make?
And are you structuring your discussion logically? For instance, are you moving ideas from general concepts to specific details? Because that's a very common structure.
It is, and we see this flaw a lot, especially in the methodology or results sections. Writers will jump straight into presenting, say, finding C, before they've even established finding A or B, which are foundational.
They get excited about the result.
They get excited.
Yeah.
But academic structure almost always requires a clear progression. You give the context, then the method, then the results in sequence, and then the interpretation. If you skip steps in that explanation, you break coherence instantly.
And this is where that initial thesis structure check comes back into play, right? If your thesis statement promised that your argument would proceed based on 3 points, let's call them Claim 1, Claim 2, and Claim 3.
In that order.
In that precise order, your body paragraphs must deliver them in the exact same sequence. If you deviate from that initial roadmap, you immediately introduce incoherence because you've basically broken a promise you made to the reader on page 1.
And I want to address a common writer's dilemma here. You mentioned the need to be ruthless. What if the answers to these flow questions are no, but I love the paragraph I wrote?
I spent so long on it.
Exactly. But you must be prepared to physically move entire sections and paragraphs around, even if it feels painful, because the structure takes precedence over your emotional attachment to a piece of writing.
That's that sunk cost fallacy again, but applied at the paragraph level.
It is.
And I suppose you overcome that attachment by reminding yourself of the core objective. The paper's success is measured by the clarity of its argument, not the beauty of its individual sentences. If a paragraph is brilliant but it's misplaced, its brilliance is just lost.
It's completely lost. Move it or cut it. The final paper needs to feel correct to a detached, critical reader, not just to you.
Okay, so moving on. The second action in the toolkit.
This one is fundamental. Action B, ensuring paragraph unity. This is the core rule of academic writing that, surprisingly, gets violated constantly, even by seasoned writers.
And the rule is so brilliantly simple, yet it's difficult to enforce when you're in the weeds of a complex research paper. And the rule is, each paragraph must contain one clear idea.
One idea, one paragraph, period.
That's it.
If you find a single paragraph rambling on about the history of an issue, then pivoting to present 3 separate pieces of data on current trends, and then finally trying to summarize the implications for future policy.
That's a mess.
You have 3 paragraphs attempting to masquerade as one. Ziad's draft had many paragraphs like this. The information density was really high, but the focus was just scattershot.
And the solution is immediate and mandatory, right? If a paragraph mistakenly contains 2 or 3 separate ideas, the writer just has to split it.
Immediately.
But I can hear the objection, but that makes my paper longer and my word count is already high.
And that's where the core value proposition of this type of writing comes in. Research writing prioritizes clarity over length. A short, clear, unified paper is infinitely better and more sophisticated than a long, confusing, disjointed one.
So splitting those ideas actually helps.
It clarifies the argument for the reader and it makes the paper appear more organized and professional, even if the total word count goes up a little bit.
Okay, next we move to Action C, Mastering Topic Sentences. This is the paragraph's headline, the first impression. It has to do some heavy lifting.
Absolutely. The topic sentence is the guidepost. It must begin the paragraph by clearly stating the main idea, that singular focus, that the subsequent sentences will then support, explore, or elaborate on. If the topic sentence is weak or vague,
The whole paragraph is sunk.
the entire paragraph is compromised from the start because the reader doesn't know what they're supposed to be looking for.
Okay, so let's look at the strong example we have. Instead of beginning with a passive or generic phrase, a strong topic sentence is precise, and it sets the entire scope. The example is, exercise reduces anxiety among university students by lowering stress hormones.
Notice the rigor in that single sentence. It's so packed. It specifies the scope, right? University students, it defines the specific action. It reduces anxiety, and it provides the mechanism by lowering stress hormones.
So the rest of that paragraph now has a singular, clear mandate.
It does. It has to provide evidence and analysis showing how the reduction of stress hormones via exercise achieves that outcome in that specific population. No tangents allowed.
Now, let's contrast that with the effect of a weak topic sentence, the kind that Ziad often used in his first draft. Something like, in regard to university students, exercise is something that is widely seen as being very beneficial.
You can just feel the energy drain out of that sentence.
The reader is immediately lost.
Yeah.
Are we talking about physical benefits, academic benefits, psychological benefits? This lack of initial focus disrupts coherence right away because the rest of the paragraph just feels aimless.
The topic sentence is the contract you make with the reader for that paragraph.
Yeah.
And coherence is all about fulfilling the reader's expectations. The topic sentence sets those expectations perfectly.
Okay, so to guide the reader seamlessly between those perfectly unified paragraphs, we turn to Action D, using transition signals effectively.
Right, the logical connectors. Transitions are necessary to guide the reader seamlessly between ideas, signaling the precise relationship, whether it's contrast or addition or causality, between the previous idea and the upcoming one. Good writers don't just hope the reader infers the connection, they explicitly state it.
And we're not just talking about using and or also. We need signals that can convey more complex logical relationships. For example, to signal opposition or contradiction.
You'd use words like however, on the other hand, or conversely.
And to show addition or sequence.
You'd use in addition, furthermore, or moreover. If you're establishing a cause and effect relationship, you must use therefore, consequently, or as a result. These signals are like navigational aids that maintain the logical integrity of your argument.
A critical failure here, and one that's easy to make, is misusing a transition signal. Let's say you're about to introduce a contradictory piece of evidence to the previous paragraph, but you accidentally use the word similarly.
Oh, that's a disaster.
You've immediately destroyed your argument's logic. You've told the reader the ideas are comparable when they are actually opposed. It's an easy error to make, but it's devastating for coherence.
And the final structural check in our coherence toolkit is Action E, checking the overall unity of the paper.
This brings us right back to the thesis, the central engine of the entire paper. I like the idea of mentally drawing a circle around your thesis statement and just making sure that every single paragraph falls inside that circle of relevance.
That's a great visualization. The check is simple but demanding. Does every single paragraph relate back to the central thesis? I often tell people to think of the thesis as the sun, and the paragraphs are the planets orbiting it. If a paragraph suddenly drifts off course and no longer relates to the core thesis, it's unnecessary weight. It's a digression that just dilutes the argument's power.
So if a paragraph deviates from the thesis, the writer has only two options, and both of them require some intellectual discipline.
Right. You either remove it entirely, or you rephrase it so rigorously that it explicitly establishes a clear, undeniable connection back to the thesis. If the paragraph doesn't serve the core argument, you have to cut it, no matter how much you like the content. Unity is paramount.
This toolkit, checking the logical order, ensuring paragraph unity, mastering topic sentences, using transition signals, and ensuring overall unity, this is the bedrock that took Ziad's draft from just a compilation of research into a powerfully flowing academic paper.
Right. So once you've established that structural flow and you've addressed the architecture, the next phase of revision focuses rigorously on the quality and the power of the argument itself.
So we're moving from fixing how the ideas are connected to improving what the ideas fundamentally say.
Exactly.
We need to list the precise criteria under which an academic argument gains power and, gravitas. It's not enough for a claim to just be true. It has to be demonstrably rigorously supported.
The first criterion is connectivity. The evidence you present must be directly and explicitly connected to your central thesis. You have to show the reader the link. You can never just assume they will make that cognitive leap for you.
So if you introduce a piece of data,
You must follow it with an analysis that interprets that data in terms of your argument. Don't just drop it in.
okay. Second, claims must be supported by verifiable data, specific findings, or existing robust research. They can't just be stated as personal opinion or generalized assertion.
This is really the difference between a high school journal entry and a university-level paper. Academic writing is founded on verifiability.
Third, and this is one where I think we need to spend some time, the writer must actively and ruthlessly avoid broad generalizations.
Yes, generalities lack punch, they diminish your credibility, and they often suggest the writer hasn't done the deep, precise work necessary to narrow their claim.
Generalizations sound like hedging, don't they? They include words like many people believe, or it seems obvious, or most studies suggest, but they never cite which studies or which people or why it seems obvious.
They're hollow claims. They're empty.
And finally,
And finally, a real hallmark of intellectual maturity in advanced academic writing is that the writer acknowledges and addresses opposing or contradictory perspectives. If it's necessary for balance and rigor, show that you understand the nuances of the debate. Showing you grasp the counterarguments actually strengthens your own position because it demonstrates thorough research and fairness.
let's focus on the power of precision now, because I feel like this is the key takeaway for listeners wanting to move from B-level writing to A-level writing. The linguistic difference between vague conversational language and strong academic language is just astounding.
It's night and day. Let's look at the detailed example of weakness. We start with the weak version, which is a common generalization you'd hear in casual conversation. Exercise is good for students.
Right. That statement is technically true, but it's academically useless. It offers no depth, no defined mechanism, no specific scope, and no claim that can be tested or refuted or debated. It's just a statement of consensus, not an argument.
Exactly. Now compare that to the stronger version, which is precise and supported. Research consistently shows that exercise reduces stress symptoms among university students by regulating mood and improving sleep quality.
The layers of improvement are just so evident. It specifies who university students, not just people. It specifies it reduces stress symptoms, not just that it's good. And it specifies how by regulating mood and improving sleep quality. That's the mechanism.
And crucially, it references support by starting with, research consistently shows. It asserts a documented fact, not just a personal feeling.
Let's do another example. What about generalizing verbs?
That's a great one. Don't say, the results might suggest that policy X could potentially lead to better outcomes. That's so weak.
It sounds like you're not sure of your own findings.
Right. Instead, use active verbs and a precise scope. The comparative analysis demonstrates that implementing policy X improves outcomes in 80% of urban school districts. The shift in precision gives the argument so much more power.
The synthesis is clear. The strong version is precise, supported, and connected. You move from simply reporting that something happens to arguing how and why it happens using documented, specific evidence. That is how you rigorously sharpen the substance of your argument.
And before we move into the final mechanical checks, there is a crucial step that sits right here immediately after you strengthen your claims, and that is checking, paraphrasing, and citations. This is a pre-editing review, and it is non-negotiable for academic integrity.
This is a huge trap. Many writers fall into the trap of superficial paraphrasing. They believe that if they just change a few adjectives or swap the first and last word in a source sentence, they've made it their own.
And that is academic misconduct. Paraphrasing requires rewriting the source material completely into your own voice, your own syntax, and your own sentence structure, while retaining the original meaning and, of course, citing the source.
So what are the critical questions you need to ask yourself here?
You need to ask three things as you check every instance of evidence integration. First, did I capture the source material correctly without twisting its meaning? That's basic accuracy. Second, and this is a very common trap, did I accidentally copy the original sentence structure or the syntactical flow?
That's a subtle one.
It is. Copying the structure, even if you've swapped every major content word, is still a form of structural plagiarism. It's often unintentional, but it's highly damaging to your credibility.
And most importantly, the foundational rule of academic discourse.
Did I remember to cite the idea, even when using my own words? If the idea, the finding, the concept, the conclusion belongs to the original researcher, you must cite the source. It doesn't matter if you quoted directly or paraphrased extensively, the citation must be there.
This rigorous check ensures that your originality and academic integrity are preserved. If you skip this, you're risking the foundations of your entire paper.
Absolutely. You must verify that your supporting evidence is properly attributed and seamlessly integrated into your argument, not just, dropped in as an unverified block quote.
Okay, we've established the structure and we've strengthened the substance. Now let's talk about the techniques. The highly effective, immediate actions you can take right now to catch errors and smooth out the delivery, especially those errors your brain just tends to skip over.
Right. These techniques are designed specifically to bypass the familiarity trap. When you've read your own paper dozens and dozens of times, your brain literally memorizes the text. It fills in missing words for you, and it ignores awkward phrasing. You need to shock your brain into seeing the work afresh.
Okay, technique one, the read aloud technique. This is the immediate fix. Across all disciplines, this is identified as one of the single best methods for identifying problems that the eye often misses,
Especially rhythm and flow problems.
which was central to Ziyad's struggle with coherence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This works because writing is often a visual activity, but speech is auditory and linear. When you read aloud, you are forced to process every single word sequentially, at a steady pace. You can't skim or mentally jump ahead, and you hear the awkwardness.
Let's talk about the specific problems revealed by reading aloud. You immediately catch those long or confusing sentences that make you gasp for breath.
That's a sure sign of syntactical overload.
You hear awkward phrasing that just sounds unnatural when spoken. You identify missing words, like prepositions or articles, which the eye usually skips right over.
And critically, you catch unnecessary repetition and weak transitions that create a jarring auditory or mental pause.
The rule of thumb here is, if you stumble, hesitate, or find yourself correcting the grammar mid-sentence when reading your own work.
The reader will certainly stumble too. Good academic writing should sound professional and fluid when read aloud, even if the concepts are complex. If it sounds choppy, the rhythm is broken. For example, reading it aloud helps you realize that a phrase like, the methodology that was employed by the researcher in the preceding phase,
So clunky.
it's far too verbose and awkward compared to just saying, the previous methodology.
Much better. Okay, technique two is about maximizing efficiency and respecting the reader's time. Cutting unnecessary words. This is the conciseness imperative. This is where you aggressively trim the word fat.
And you have to be aggressive. Academic writing must be clear and concise. Every single word has to earn its place on the page. It has to contribute actively to the meaning. Fluffy, verbose language just signals uncertainty, or worse, an attempt to hit a word count.
And those are two things we want to avoid. So what are we cutting specifically?
We are looking for phrases that express obvious ideas. Things like, it should be noted that, or in a very real sense, just get to the point.
We're also eliminating extra redundant adjectives, right? Like
Yeah.
describing evidence as highly significant and incredibly important when just significant or important is perfectly adequate.
Absolutely. We're breaking down lengthy sentences that could and should be separated into 2 or 3 simpler thoughts, which reduces the cognitive load on the reader.
What about nominalizations? That's a big one.
That's a huge one, turning verbs into nouns unnecessarily. Instead of writing, the implementation of the policy requires consideration of the factors, you should write, implementing the policy requires considering the factors. The second version is immediate, active, and much more precise.
Let's use the detailed example of concision from the sources because it's so powerful. We start with the weak verbose writing, which contains both passive voice and hedging. It is very clear and highly obvious that students who do not sleep enough might perhaps have difficulty concentrating in class.
Ugh, that sentence is just agonizingly slow. It uses 8 words just to establish the obvious. It is very clear and highly obvious. And then it hedges the claim with, might perhaps have difficulty. It just sounds so tentative and unconfident.
And now, the strong, concise example. Lack of sleep reduces students' ability to concentrate.
Boom, done. We have removed the flab and eliminated the hedging. The sentence is shorter, clearer, and infinitely stronger. We cut 11 words down to 7, and the meaning is delivered with immediate impact. This discipline of conciseness is non-negotiable in professional writing.
So after you've applied those immediate practical techniques before moving to the final mechanics, you perform the final revision checklist. This is the last check on the ideas and the macro flow before you can declare the structure finished.
Right. First, check the opening. Does the introduction flow smoothly into the thesis? There shouldn't be a jarring jump from the broad background material to your narrow claim. The funnel of the introduction must feel carefully calibrated and logical.
Second, and this is where many advanced papers gain or lose credit, is the literature review successfully synthesized, not merely summarized?
This is such a critical distinction.
It is. Synthesis is the discussion of the relationship between your sources. Where do they agree, where do they disagree, and how do their collective findings build toward or maybe challenge your unique thesis? Summary is just listing what each article says, one after the other. If you are just summarizing, you are not creating new knowledge.
Third, reconfirm unity. Do all body paragraphs logically connect back to the thesis now that you've done all your cutting and refining? If you had to remove or refocus anything back in Section 2, you have to ensure the remaining structure is sound and watertight.
Fourth, check the landing. Is the conclusion strong and appropriately reflective of the findings? A conclusion should summarize the argument's trajectory and maybe suggest future avenues for research.
But it must not introduce new evidence or tangential claims. Conclusions close the loop. They don't open new ones.
And finally, a brutal assessment.
Was all unnecessary content successfully removed? If you feel strongly attached to a section, but intellectually that doesn't serve the core argument, you must cut it. Once you confirm the ideas are strong and the structure is sound, you can finally move into the last mile, mechanical inspection.
Okay, we've reserved this final section for the fine-grained checks that address absolute accuracy and formatting consistency. The structure is finished. Now the focus shifts entirely to achieving mechanical perfection.
First, we are editing for grammar and style. We're ensuring that the writing itself is flawless. And we're focusing on areas that often trip up academic writers, especially in these long, complex documents.
High on that list has to be subject-verb agreement, which gets incredibly complicated in long, multi-clause sentences.
It does. Writers often forget the original subject when a long prepositional phrase intervenes. For example, the results of the complex statistical analysis, including all supplementary data, shows a correlation.
Right. The subject is results, which is plural, so the verb has to be show.
Exactly. You must ensure the main subject of the sentence aligns with the main verb, regardless of all the noise in between.
We must also aggressively prioritize sentence clarity. So actively look for and break down those very long, sprawling sentences that test the reader's memory.
Remember, complex ideas do not require complex sentences. They require clear ones. If a sentence takes up more than, say, 3 lines on the page, chances are it can be broken into 2 stronger, simpler sentences.
And stylistically, we need to maintain that professional academic tone. Avoid slang, contractions, emotional language, or overly informal phrasing that undermines the seriousness of the research.
Absolutely. Words like crazy, totally, or a bunch of have no place in this document.
Okay, so let's highlight several common mechanical mistakes that require specific attention during this final editing pass.
Run-on sentences are a perennial problem. These are sentences that combine multiple independent clauses without proper coordination or conjunctions or appropriate punctuation like a semicolon. You must either split them or connect them properly.
Also check for misused transitions. Even if the transition signals are in the right structural place, ensure the correct word is being used. Using and when you should have used however is a mechanical error that completely changes the meaning of the logical connection you're trying to make.
And finally, there is the pervasive issue of unclear pronouns. This is a killer for clarity and a major source of reader friction.
This is one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader. Unclear pronouns are often overlooked because the writer knows what it or this refers to, but the reader is left to guess.
And they have to stop and do mental detective work.
Yeah.
For example, the team implemented the new protocol and the data was collected over 6 months. This led to faster processing times.
What does this refer to? The implementation of the protocol. The data collection, the whole sentence, it's completely ambiguous.
You must insert the noun immediately after the pronoun to clarify. This implementation led to faster processing times, or the careful analysis showed a significant correlation. Fixing those mechanical issues, subject-verb agreement, run-on sentences, and especially pronoun clarity, can dramatically improve the polish and professionalism of your entire paper.
And now, the very last stage, the non-negotiable final proofreading. You are literally minutes away from submission, and you need to perform one last strategic move to trick your eye into catching errors.
We strongly recommend changing the format. If you wrote the paper digitally, print it out and read it with a pen. This physical engagement often highlights errors.
Or, if you can't print,
Change the font, say from Times New Roman to Courier. Increase the font size dramatically or change the background viewing color, anything that makes the familiar text look strange again. This cognitive shift forces your brain out of its memorized autopilot.
and you are checking for the simple, insidious errors here.
Yeah.
Spelling mistakes that the spell checker missed because they're correctly spelled words used in the wrong context, like using complement instead of compliment.
Or there instead of there.
Exactly. And finally, the formatting consistency check.
You have to ensure consistency in spacing, font, heading levels. Are all level 1 headings centered? Are all level 2 headings flush left? And page numbers. Inconsistent formatting looks immediately unprofessional, and it just suggests sloppiness.
And most critically, verify the reference list.
This is non-negotiable. The reference list must exactly match all in-text citations. Every single source cited internally must appear in the reference list, and every source in the reference list must have been cited internal. If those two lists don't align perfectly, your paper is not ready.
And you risk a serious academic integrity flag. This is the last and most important point of accuracy.
So let's circle back to Ziad. His initial confidence in his research, it really masked a deep structural and coherence problem. But by following these steps, starting with the revision of meaning, implementing the Coherence toolkit, rigorously strengthening his evidence, and then moving into mechanical editing, his final draft was transformed. It was coherent, it was authoritative, and it was polished.
The central lesson we hope you internalize today is that revision is not merely about correcting mistakes. It is fundamentally about improving meaning, flow, and clarity. It is the discipline where good research becomes great communication, elevating your argument from a B-level effort to a genuinely compelling A-level paper.
You now have the architectural and the inspection tools to ensure that every idea flows logically, every claim is precise and supported, and every sentence is mechanically flawless. You've moved from being just a writer to being an editor and an architect of your own work.
And since academic writing values clarity and conciseness above all else, we'll leave you with this provocative thought for your own work. Consider the power of silence in your writing. If you know that every word is essential, what is the single strongest, most concise sentence you wrote today? And does its clarity stand up to the rigorous test of reading it aloud? You now have the tools to make it shine.